Hello, hello, and welcome to the Off-Script
Hello.
Physio podcast. We love unpacking the humans behind the clinicians, don't we, Bowie?
Yeah, love it. Love it. Talking all things physio.
Exactly. Look, today we're speaking to Karina Chilman, and she is an amazing therapist who's done so many things as part of her career. Let's just drum through some of the touch points. Cirque du Soleil, Tokyo Olympics, AFLW, Commonwealth Games, a physio for touring rock stars, and Sport Integrity Australia. Now, Karina will give us so much more context to all of these, but for anyone wondering, how did that physio get into that role? This is the episode to listen to. Karina will share all her thoughts, all her pivot points, and how she made those decisions to keep seeking different pathways in her career. Let's take it away.
Karina, welcome. Thanks for coming on the podcast. So happy to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for
No
having
worries.
me.
Karina, did you always want to be a physio?
I don't think so. I think I was one of those young kids that didn't really know what they wanted to do in high school, but definitely knew what they liked and what they didn't like, which was maths. Never really took to maths. So thankfully, my physio career, I haven't had to do too much with the calculator. But yeah, I think I just was really influenced by some great teachers at my high school in sort of that health and human development and PE space, and ended up getting a recommendation from my principal to get into a physio program. So sort of the stars aligned with that. And then, I got accepted into that program and went on my merry way as a very young 17-year-old to O week for physio. So I was the baby of the year level, well and truly.
Bet you didn't drink it all at O Week then.
Definitely.
If you were 17.
Responsible.
No, definitely not.
Wonderful. And then after your bachelor's, where did you go? What happened next?
Yeah, so I was really lucky enough to have like an allied health assistant position in second, third, and fourth year physio. So every holidays, I would, in between uni holidays and placements, which we had to do quite a lot of, I would go back to my hometown and work as an allied health assistant at the public hospital, which was such a great opportunity to really be involved in the physio space. And they really provided a lot of mentoring and opportunities and supervision in that area. So pretty much the day we got our APRA registration, I transitioned from being an allied health assistant into a physio role. So I'd been offered a rotation at the hospital, and we just kept me working as an allied health assistant until I got that, and then did my graduate year in the public system. So rotating, I think I did 5 rotations through the hospital, which was really good, really nice, really wonderful staff to work with. They were such a lovely team, and that sort of real big multidisciplinary team and a country region. So you're definitely seeing everything under the sun coming through the door, as opposed to some of the big hospitals where you might see a lot of knees or a lot of shoulders or a lot of cardiac. We saw everything. So it was a really good transition into working.
And I think it's such a good reminder. I did hospital work as well before I went into my much more private practice-sided career, but it's such a broad grounding, isn't it, in the things that you've learned. I think what will be interesting, especially for young physios listening today, your career then becomes quite the shopping list of, if I wish I could be an amazing sports physio, I would love to do these things. We've got a bit of Cirque du Soleil, we've got a bit of Olympics, Commonwealth Games, AFLW, and we'll get to your current role as well. But I think what people are really asking always in their mind is, how did you get those roles? So really what we want to focus on is, where did the turning points happen, and how did the decisions get made? How did you know what to do and when? So perhaps we'll launch that, Karina. Where do you think was the first big pivot or the big sort of step towards success that happened in your career?
That's a really interesting question, because thinking back, like I probably don't know how much of it was like, this is the decision of what I'm going to do and these are the steps I'm going to take to get there. There was maybe less of that happening for me, more of a gradual sort of opportunities come up, taking certain opportunities, and they, lead to decisions that have to be made at the time about what you're going to do or where you're going to move to or live. So I think that was probably I knew I wanted to go into sport, and I was working part-time at a local sort of level football club. And I had a really great mentor who was like, yep, you're doing your hospital, which is awesome. But if you were to go down this pathway, you probably need to go into that private practice where you're just going to get exposed to athletes and people playing sport more so than what you're going to be able to do in this sort of part-time weekend work capacity. So yeah, got my first job in private practice, and then didn't actually like it at all at first. Really found it really difficult. Lasted about 9 months. Had some pretty not great experiences.
What was hard about it?
Just, I think going from that public health where you're surrounded by colleagues all the time, you're really highly supervised, you've got people to essentially being alone a lot of the time with no one around. And we also did a lot of off-site clinic work as well, where you were sent into different organisations to work as a physio by yourself there with the staff. So I felt very, very isolated, I think, in that role. And it really changed sort of, there was a little bit of working in a sports area there, but it wasn't probably a great foray as again, I was only 21 when I graduated physio. So still pretty young in the scheme of things to be sort of going from having been in a workplace surrounded by people who were really supportive for 3 and a bit years to being alone off-site as the sole practitioner was really hard. And so then I did what every mature person does and packed it in and went overseas for, I think, 7 months. Came back home essentially with $300 in my pocket and was like, okay, what am I going to do now? And then, ended up doing a program over in Perth for 4 weeks with some really great sports physios and doctors and strength and conditioning coaches. It was like an intensive block of sports exposure and training, and that was wonderful. And then I ended up getting a job in a couple of really wonderful private practices in Melbourne. So moved into the private practice space that was really different, really supportive environment, really providing opportunities to have mentoring and be exposed to sort of a more athletic population. So that sort of changed my trajectory, which probably was going in the wrong direction for a while there. And that sort of set me off on the path to where we ended up today.
So yeah, this is super interesting. And I love the fact that we have a conversation around being alone in physio. It can be quite a lonely profession. And I'm sure a lot of people that might have listened to being a private practitioner in a room, just seeing patients all day and not actually interacting with anybody. And if we don't talk about it, we don't necessarily figure out a way to be supportive. So it's fascinating as well that just there you can talk about a clinic where you are alone versus a clinic. You're still kind of doing private practice thing, but you feel supported. Going away, I love it. Just packing and go and just being like, I'm done.
It's a rite of
drawing a
passage,
line.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So during that time, did you still have the passion for physio coming back? You kind of were led there in school and you kind of were supported into your first job at the hospital and then kind of going away. What made you kind of have the fire to come back and do physio and not change?
I think it was always not going to completely disappear. I probably wasn't just going to throw the towel in too soon. And then essentially that program that I did over in Perth was wonderful. It really drove a lot of motivation internally, and that the connections that were made there and the learnings of some experts in the field was like, okay, yeah, no, I do want to do this. You can be supported in your role. You can learn off other professions. You don't have to know anything. You've got these experts who are like, well, we don't fully know, but this is what we think. And that was quite reassuring, that even they were saying, you don't have to be perfect. So there was quite a good mix there. And then I think just the role that I ended up getting at the private practices that made that motivation really come back. And, money is also a good incentive to go back to work. I was like, I need to eat and live somewhere. So that definitely helps, maintain the energy levels. And you're young and you're fit and you like working and you're independent. So sort of lots of motivations. But yeah, the clinics I ended up getting roles at in Melbourne were just wonderful. And I'm still, very close with a lot of the colleagues that I met at both of those clinics. I still catch up for coffees with them, even though we're now sort of 13 years down the track. And I haven't been there for a while. So I really lucked out with where I was working. And they were sort of that bigger multidisciplinary centre where you really have doctors, other physios, massage therapists, dietitians all working around you. So it really was a really different environment.
That's
Obviously, that
awesome.
sense of community means a lot to you, and you obviously really value the connections because you've kept them. But I think it's such a good reminder. Like when I think of my career, I've lived so many different lives within it. And I think for people stuck in a pathway that doesn't really feel like them, or they're not really loving, it doesn't necessarily mean physio's not right. It may just be not even the discipline within physio, but the environment that's not right. Speaking of
Exactly.
changing environments, you obviously did some amazing work in these collaborative settings. But then you decided to run away with the circus. Tell us about that. How did the opportunity come about? And this was a really big pivot point for you. And how did that decision tumble upon you?
Yeah, pretty standard. So obviously saw a job advertised and thought, oh, that looks really interesting, and had some colleagues at the clinic I worked at who had previously worked for Cirque du Soleil. So, did a lot of chatting with them about, well, what's the reality of it actually like? What's the lifestyle like? And he was just like, go for it. Best decision I ever made. Changed my life. You'd love it. You'd be great at it. I'll help you along the way with how to prep for an interview. And it was, as you guys would know, the interview process is a pretty intense process at Cirque. So I think it's 4 rounds, sort of that clinical round, and then more like a one-to-one about you as a person round, and sort of moving through the different layers, and, managed to make a really good connection with some of the people on the show. And I think that sort of has maintained again to this day. Like I still would consider them close friends and mentors, just because their management style was just absolutely brilliant. And it aligned really well with sort of feeling like I did want a bit of a change. I'd done a lot of traveling intermittently with teams, so all around Australia, and some intermittent trips with representative national teams by this point, and was like, oh, I really like this. I'm not in a position to be sort of buying a house at the moment. My lease is up where I'm renting. Sort of the stars aligned. And then I actually broke my foot the day I signed my Cirque contract. So signed my contract in the morning, had a bit of a celebration, played a game of basketball, and broke 3 bones in my foot. So my 5th and 4th
Not
and
just
3rd
one. Oh,
not
that was
just
clever.
one. Yeah. So that
Perfect.
was really unfun. Ended up in a moon boot. So I had to delay my start. Don't think rolling into Japan to a show in a moon boot was going to be that great of an impression. So that was quite funny and very stressful at the time. But now I look back and think, oh, that was just so unlucky. Feeling that crunch, and the first thought being like, oh no, I may also lose my job. But they obviously didn't do that. So yeah, really awesome experience to go and do Cirque du Soleil for quite a while. Bit of a baptism of fire, sort of arriving in another country. You walk into the giant tent and you're just a bit like, oh, this is pretty crazy. But they really support you as well. And we had some awesome people there, which just make all the difference. It's like a big, weird circus family.
Yes, very much so. Yeah, I look,
Yeah.
Kaz, for those that don't know, Kaz and I both work for Cirque du Soleil as well. And it's hard to put into words what it is, like as a kind of chapter in your life. It really kind of, you run away, you're inside a bubble, and you experience all of these things. And then all 3 of us now are not working for Cirque, some by choice, some not by choice. So tell me about your experience leaving Cirque, getting out of that bubble, and what happened.
Yeah, so it was COVID essentially. We had our premiere show in my home city of Melbourne. So we'd done the sort of the tour of Asia and arrived back in Australia, arrived in Melbourne, and had all the preparations with this sort of, rumors around this virus that was sweeping the world, and not really probably taking that much notice until, we did our premiere and found out, I think the day after premiere, brought into a big meeting, and it's like, everyone, we're sending you all home. tomorrow. It was quite funny. My home was, 5 minutes down the road. So I think I got like $17 or something to get me home. And I was like, oh, I've got an Uber fare, whereas some people got
some people's airfares were like a few grand over the other side of the world, and you're like, I'm just heading up the road.
Yeah, it was quite funny comparing. I was like, oh, yes, I've got my Uber fare. And I think I just walked anyway, but kept pocketed the money.
Oh,
Shouldn't say that.
That's
but,
the way to do it. That's
it
how
was
to
a very
save for a house
strange,
deposit.
very strange end, because no one knew what was going to happen. So it was, is this a couple of days? Is this a couple of weeks? You're also, you still have those active illnesses and active injuries and surgeries and all of those complexities. So we were essentially still working for a little while we just tried to sort out all of these bits and pieces remotely as well. So, and staying quite connected as a group was really helpful while everyone just sort of navigated. And then as the months just sort of went on and on and on, and then the call that essentially none of us were really going back in the same format, and I was just like, look, that it is what it is now. And I also, I sound quite injury prone. I also really hurt my shoulder during the pack up of the tent. So I did quite a rare injury. I damaged my long thoracic nerve in my shoulder. So for the first few months, while being off work, I essentially wouldn't have been able to work as a physio clinically anyway, because I was I had, really significant nerve damage in my arm. So I was just sort of, finishing off my master's. I loaded up my subjects a lot more, and got some research work as well. And then sort of once my shoulder was rehabbed, I ended up going back into private practice in Melbourne again.
In
Wow.
the absolute boss move of making lemonade out of lemons, ultimately this whole COVID situation led you to being part of the Tokyo Olympics. How was that? And it was a role transition. So how did that feel? Unpack it all.
One thing led to another, and through various connections and experiences that I'd had working with different people, I ended up getting a role with the Olympic team for Tokyo. So it was around the COVID preparations that the Japanese government required for the teams to enter. So it was called a COVID liaison. So essentially you're taking on all of the information, and we had a team of us that were doing this, and working with really closely with the medical team and the operations team, and then the Japanese side of things as well, to make sure that everyone who was selected and was going over to Tokyo could actually physically get there, and were really safe and abided by all the requirements and testing regimes, and coordinating that with a significant size team who were all across different state borders. Some were already overseas, so across international borders, and then safely getting them into the village, and then navigating all of the rules in that sort of COVID really high stress sort of environment. So yeah, that was a pretty amazing experience, and met a lot of different people, and used a lot of different skills. But having a background as a physio, and that healthcare knowledge, and that sort of system knowledge of how the systems work for a team that's traveling, helped sort of have those conversations. And we all in that little team had different backgrounds and different skills, but that sort of helped navigate being able to communicate with the medical teams, with the teams, because they know that I know what they're experiencing. So try to sort of get ahead of that in the way you communicated with them. But no matter how you look at it, it was challenging, and it was hard for everyone. Those requirements were really significant, and they impacted a lot of people's ability to enjoy the games. But essentially we got through without having cases, and we were quite successful in that. So a really, really interesting experience, not probably like what it would be for a physio heading away, but still being involved in that team, and learning so much from how they manage everything. And ultimately, if someone got COVID, they were out. So it was really on the highest priority of everyone, because you don't even get to the start line if that happens. So it was really taken very seriously. And then ended up doing it again for the Birmingham Commonwealth Games. So I guess they identified that there wasn't that many of us who had the experience, and because of the delay from 2020 to 2021, Birmingham being in 2022, I almost rolled straight in to doing that again. With a number of the same people. So unfortunately for a lot of the sports, they would see, an email from me, like, me again, talking about COVID compliance, and they'd be like, oh no, you again. And I'll be like, oh, yep, sorry, but I've now got this name for myself in this area. And but, it meant that, we could have a little bit of a laugh, and they knew that, we weren't just making it up. As we were going along, we sort of took a lot of the learnings. But yeah, again, like working in that space with my spreadsheets and my color coordinated
Love
tabs
it.
and
Yes.
A woman of
trying to
my own
organise
heart, that's
everything.
for sure.
Incredible. So, Karina, can I just ask, stepping into the leadership roles, essentially, and in things that people hadn't done before, we don't typically get those types of lectures in undergrad. And so, how did you feel transitioning from kind of a clinical space into a leadership space? And what skills do you reckon were really transferable from physio, and what do you think you just kind of picked up through experience and trial by fire?
I definitely don't know how I feel about like being called a leader. Like I don't know. It still feels like it sits like, oh, am I really like a leader? I don't know. I think being really organized, so sort of that genuinely really helped. Like being able to just be like, yeah, well, here's the stats of where we're up to. This is sort of where we need to get to, and those sort of skills that you do learn from managing a caseload, and sort of problem solving a little bit in there, and using that broader interdisciplinary team. Even though now the team isn't just your doctors and your medical team, it was more broadly with your operational and logistical teams and your leadership team. So navigating with those people, the challenges, while also sort of being sometimes like the bearer of bad news, which we definitely have to do in a physio world a lot, is like, well, yes, you could do that, but here's the risks of if we do that, like with injury or illness, of pushing through or pushing the boundaries. I felt like there was a lot of similarities in kind of being like, yes, but this is what the risk would be, and was really lucky to work with some brilliant people who could actually be like, the risk is this, with their sort of modelling around risk factors to do with COVID as well. So that was quite good to have those genuine like infectious disease subject matter experts to be like, okay, this is what you're saying. My job is to translate that to this group of people around a table who are trying to make big decisions, to articulate to them, you may have this as an outcome if you do this, and these are the things we can do to reduce it. So yeah, it was quite interesting coming from a physio background into that, but a lot of transferable skills in that space. And then I'm just one of those people that I understand that there is hierarchies, and you've got CEOs and these really experienced people, and sometimes I just still put my hand up and be like, but what about this? Which is maybe not always the greatest time. You might look a little bit silly, but I've always asked a lot of questions, and always never really been afraid to ask for help. Just like, I don't really know what I'm doing here. Can someone please help me? And, there's always people who have very niche areas of knowledge that are very willing to share with you. So that was always probably something where I was like, oh, who am I talking to? Oh, that's actually the president of this, or that's oh, okay.
It's amazing, Karina. I always feel like the best leaders are humble ones. And you saying you're not sure if you really fall in the leader category. I know your current job title starts with assistant director, so I can confirm you are very much in a leadership role. But I think that's such a good point. I don't think there are ever bad questions. There's just bad ways that people package them. I think if you come from a place of wanting to find out more and acknowledging that you have a knowledge gap, I don't think those questions are ever badly received. I know that, I don't know quite where this fits in, but I know that you did some work with AFLW, which for our overseas listeners who aren't in Australia, that's our Australian Football League, the women's part of the league. And you did some leadership work or training there. Is that right?
Um, No, that was just before. So, sort of in between Tokyo Olympics finishing and Birmingham kind of kicking off,
Uh-huh.
I, in typical me fashion, probably bit off too many roles. So, I ended up going back to the private practice I was working at, which was a performing arts clinic, a really specialized performing arts clinic covering a lot of the big Broadway style shows
Uh-huh.
in Melbourne, as well as doing some research assistant role at La Trobe Uni in some of their programs. And then also I picked up the AFLW role in between. It was like I came back from the Olympics, like, what am I going to do? I'm going to do everything.
Yeah.
And so ended up coming in like literally the week before round one of that AFLW season as one of the physios in that team. So
Uh-huh.
so that was quite a lot happening all at once. And then pretty much maybe 3/4 of the way through the season, the Birmingham role really, really kicked off. So it all kind of came, end of the season, and I had to sort of cut a few things. And so, yeah, I ended up leaving the AFLW team, but had a really awesome experience there. It was a whirlwind season because they were still impacted by COVID, and it was still in its relatively early days of developing as a league. But those athletes are amazing. What the female athletes at those clubs do, and some of the challenges that they're faced with. But it was a great experience, and being able to sort of work again in that big team environment was really, really good. And then everything just kind of decisions had to be made, what had to go. So yeah, I decided to not continue on for the next season.
Nice.
And then I started at Sport Integrity Australia, and through that role there, I got one of the women in sports leadership scholarships from
That's
the
where it
Sports
fitted in.
Commission.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Uh-huh.
through the Australian Sports Commission, they have a real promotion of developing female leaders, and I was lucky enough to get one of those scholarships, and I did a training program on like executive leadership, sort of designed to build up some of your skills. And as you mentioned, Ben, like as physios, we do a lot of clinical, and then we do masters and all things, but often it is very directed at your clinical skills, whereas this was more around, I guess, business and leadership and developing your style, I guess, as a leader. So that was where I think the program you're referencing. So it sort of happened after each other.
I see.
But yeah, those scholarships are really great. The program still runs. So anyone out there in Australia who's looking to do something, like, they're a really good opportunity to connect you with other, people at a similar phase of their career, and also put some financial support behind you to actually go and do them, because they are quite expensive on your PD allowance sometimes.
Amazing. So fast forward to today. Now, what is your day to day, week to week look like now?
Yeah. So now I work at Sport Integrity Australia. For those that don't know, it used to be ASADA. So about 5.5 years ago, there was a big review into the sport integrity in Australia, and they merged a number of agencies together. So we're the National Anti-Doping Authority for Australia, but we also cover the key integrity threats in sport. So anti-doping, competition manipulation, um, safeguarding of children and young people, and sort of member protection. And primarily it's a lot of, working with sports to improve their risks around sports integrity. And I work particularly in the major sporting events and international engagement team. So that is my day job. So they're based in Canberra, but I work remotely from Victoria. And yeah, it's really interesting, never a dull day, very different role. But again, having come from sport and worked in sport in heaps of different contexts and different environments, from, grassroots and development all the way up to, your professional athletes across a few different codes and events, allow you to sort of see the challenges that they're facing on the ground in sport. It's really hard, and a lot of sports, as we know, are run by volunteers. So trying to sort of improve that area and work with our key partners, because it's a big, wide world of sport risks, I guess.
Sounds like such
Yeah.
an interesting shift and such a whole new excuse the pun, a whole new playing field for you to sort of get to know and
Yeah,
work
we
in.
use a lot of sport puns.
I love
Good.
it.
So
That
yeah.
makes me happy. That
Ideal.
makes me happy. So
Yeah.
can you speak to, maybe shifting into this role, but even just overall in your career, the role, if it has, that imposter syndrome has played?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's taken a few years to sort of really understand and I guess sort of, it was really highlighted just around the way different people experience imposter syndrome. And some people just don't even know what it is. And they're like, "Well, why would I feel that? Like, I'm great at my job." Whereas for sort of the last few years of my physio, career as full-time physio, the more experience I got, the more opportunities I got to go and work at a higher level, it sort of made my confidence really dip. I think, probably the most accurate combination is like imposter syndrome combined with like Dunning-Kruger effect, where like the more I learned, the less I felt like I knew. And I probably didn't have sort of good strategies to navigate that myself, because I don't think at the time I knew that's what it was, that I sort of always just felt like, well, we don't actually know that. So who am I to tell this person what they need to do? Or, why would they employ me? I don't know what I'm doing. Like, and I think it was a combination of working with some absolutely brilliant minds who are so smart and so specialist, and kind of being like, well, I'm not like them. I don't have this incredible knowledge that they do. So why would they want me? Who am I to tell this brilliant athlete what they should and shouldn't do when I'm not even 100% confident? And sort of in hindsight now, I think it is probably a little bit of a healthy battle to have, because I did probably often clash with people who were so, I'm right, you're wrong. And this is how it has to be. So it's sort of, it really did impact my confidence in my career, and it also really impacted my time management with athletes or with patients. I was really always running late. I struggled to
Oh,
keep to
interesting.
time, and a lot of it was, we were learning so much about holistic athlete well-being and the biopsychosocial model of healthcare, and how many things in someone's life are impacting the injury presentation in front of you. And I think I was trying to take on all of that and almost was acting as a coordinator for that person. So it's like, I know I'm not a dietitian. I'm not going to give you dietary advice, but let's add that in and how we do that referral. And I, really think you're being impacted psychologically by your injury, or your, your mental health is actually impacting your physical health, and kind of just taking a lot of that on board, which is really hard to do in a 30-minute session. So then I would just be like, okay, well, I'll just run late. And then you end up sort of doing that. So sometimes they're just coming to you because like, I just want you to fix my ankle. Like just that. But I sort of blew out into this, well, that's what the evidence says. And then, that's how we provide athlete-centered care. And I was really passionate about not just being like, well, I'm going to massage your ankle and you'll be sweet, kind of out the door. Like, let's get to the bottom of it. And I think I saw my role as being like almost like a case manager. And some people absolutely like benefited from that for sure, because they really need someone to take direction with their care and be like, okay, well, that's not working, so let's try this route. But it's really time consuming. And I think partially it came from not actually being that confident in what I was doing and being a bit of a jack of all trades. Like I didn't have like a specialist area that I really liked. I liked seeing everything. And then, yeah, probably got a bit convoluted in that process about what actually I'm doing and why am I always running so late and then doing notes. And yeah, it got a bit messy for a little bit there, and I lost a lot of confidence. And sort of
Sounds a
took a
little
few
like
years.
burnout too.
Yeah.
And probably a lot of burnout in there as well. And, you throw in a couple of international trips with teams where, as you guys know, like you're treating really late at night, you're back up, you're, calling doctors in the middle of the night to say, like, someone's sick and we're in, the middle of this country. What do we do? And so you come back and you go back to work to see your patients that you've now got from 9 a.m. till 9 p.m. because you haven't seen anyone in 3 weeks. So yeah, it was fun, and like I actually really enjoy being busy and those things.
Yeah.
But a lot of it was the more experience and exposure and starting to work with people who I really admire. I just was like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah, look, I think a lot of people can relate. I find I'm listening to you. I'm like, there's so many things that I feel similarly in this idea of I want to take on everything. Like, everything sounds fun. I want to throw my name into
Yeah,
the ring. But then after I've done that, I'm like, oh no, I don't have enough hours in the week. So I'm not sure how to balance this. And there's that
yeah,
constant balancing act between feeling, I guess, proactive in the profession, right? Is this sometimes we feel like we have to kind of keep moving forward. Um, so
yeah.
when it comes to that point, what do you feel that you've kind of like, what are your strategies for managing imposter syndrome now? How do you, how did you recognize it? What do you do? How do you detach essentially those moments when you're feeling overwhelmed either by the position that you're in or the amount that you're doing? What type of little tips have you got? I need them.
Yeah, I think it's just that ability to take the step backwards and zoom out on what's happening and go, okay, well, what's actually the bigger picture here? Why is this happening? And just that recognition of being like, okay, something needs to change, and having that, internal motivation to step outside and look back and go, okay, what is actually causing me to feel like this? Because I think when you're in it, you're just running on this hamster wheel of, oh, just, whatever, it'll get better. There's a holiday coming up, there's a long weekend, there's this. For me, it was, well, I can put in an extra patient here because I'll do my notes on the plane as I'm flying out to another country kind of thing. Like that was the mentality, was like, I'll squeeze in extra patients, notes will get done when I get to the airport. And it was really squeezing it in. So being able to sort of, COVID did that a lot for everyone. Everyone got to kind of step back and be like, well, what are you actually going to do? Also, like my master's program. So I did the Masters of Sports Medicine. And that had a few really different subjects. It was sort of looking at like organizational change, and how that happens, and what you're actually doing. So that definitely helped with managing it, because I was like, well, I don't have to go back where maybe it's not suited to me in my current life phase anymore. I have other opportunities, and seeing that, the skills that physio gives you are so transferable. Like physios pop up all over the place. I swear, like you'll be talking to someone and they'll be doing some, really interesting organizational role or leadership role. And, oh yeah, actually I was a physio for this many years as well. And I, for a few years, I felt like it was a little bit of a failure, that like, oh, I did all this study and I'm not using it. I am still using it. It's just really different in how you use those skills. And I'm still clinically practicing with some shows as well, and a little bit of like consulting here and there as need
Yeah.
be. Always got to keep up the CPD points and the clinical
Just got to
hours,
say
which
yes
is good.
to all the things too. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
It's so interesting how you've learnt by zooming out, as you say. It's almost like it's not that you recognize imposter syndrome if it's there, but you saw what the signals of your behaviors were that in hindsight signaled it. So there was hypervigilance. There was, if I see more and do more, that means I'm smart and doing the right thing.
yeah,
Or if I do everything 100% right, that must mean I know enough. So I think it's a really good lesson for us all to watch our behaviors. And sometimes it's then going back in hindsight and saying, now when those behaviors come up, I'll be aware that that can often mean I'm getting a little stuck in something that I shouldn't. So it's super, super interesting, and some real take homes there. You just touched on keeping your clinic hours up with some shows, work at shows. This is a business that you have. Tell us about it. It's really cool.
yeah. So a colleague and I, like over the last quite a few years, so oh gosh, I can't even remember. I think it was like 2014. Just sort of started getting some side projects, side quests with, going on tour with various artists that were coming out to Australia and working when they were in Melbourne in particular, if they had an injury that they needed someone to actually come on site. And it's grown a little bit since then. So we now work with a number of shows and they come out to Australia to help coordinate really high quality clinicians in each capital city around Australia to facilitate, proper injury assessments and, management of things and actually having some, recommendations made of well, actually, this isn't going to get better. Let's actually, get a scan done and you're going to see this person when you come from Sydney down to Melbourne and they're going to continue on with your care. Or, the late night, something's happened, someone's in a hotel room, they're in a lot of pain. What do we do? And actually having that ability to go in and say, oh no, we need to get you to emergency medical treatment, or this is okay. Let's manage this. We'll sort you out, and you'll be able to get on stage maybe in a modified capacity tomorrow. But yeah, it's really interesting and it has intermittent periods of being very busy, and periods where we don't have that many shows that are requiring our services. But yeah, we've got a few physios who are our go-tos in every city, and they're really keen and excited to do the work as well, because again, it's like taking your sports physio skills and applying them to a major touring show, and so many of the principles are the same. They're under a lot of pressure. They've got to back up the show, then they've got to get on a plane, do their recovery, do their warm-ups and their preparation, and they have injuries from everything that they might be doing in the gym or dancing or sleeping funny on an aeroplane, and they wake up and they can't turn their head. So it is a really interesting environment, but so many parallels between the sports world and the performing arts world that people probably don't realize. But it is a really awesome little side gig, and we're really happy that we've been able to sort of grow and bring people in so that it's not just us. And we're really proud that when we send clinicians into a show, we're not just sending someone in, they're really high quality, great people. And the feedback is always, oh, well, they didn't just massage my calves, they actually helped me plan and provided advice. Because I think a lot are used to traveling where they might have 10 different massage therapists come in where there's not an assessment. It's like, I'm sore, but I don't know why. And they had a lot of chronic injuries that were just kind of being carried until the tour finished. So being able to help them get through has been really rewarding as well.
Amazing. Karina, so I'm going to ask you, I'm going to cement a little bit and ask you some advice, right? So it sounded like you started out, as a lot of physios do, coming out, not necessarily sure, coming into the profession, getting some hospital experience, going through private practice. And then along the way, sometimes things happened where they weren't in your control. And although you've kind of sound like you were very adaptable, I'm sure they were incredibly stressful. Let's say I'm a physio, I'm sitting in a private practice and there's an opportunity come up, but I'm stressed about taking that pivot and that change. And I'm not sure if I'm qualified enough to step into that role, and I'm feeling kind of not entirely sure about myself. Looking back now in your profession, and your experience, what would you say to those physios looking to pivot?
I think if it's what you want to do, you almost have to just go for it, and things will fall into place as you go through it. But definitely just weigh up the considerations. There's so many, the environment has really changed, I think, especially with, all the things that impact our lives, like cost of living and families and moving. And, unfortunately, a lot of roles in the high performance physio space are still voluntary or unpaid or quite poorly remunerated. So all of those things really make a big impact on your decision making. So it does take a lot of just weighing up the reward and the benefit to doing that. And I think knowing that, it is really good that we can usually as physios, if it doesn't work out, there will be another job. there always will be something else that you can do. So having those sort of things in the back of your mind, but if it's something you really want to do, even if it's going to be a little bit difficult for your life, but it's just to try it out, probably just go for it. And then make sure that, if for certain reasons it's not working for you and your life, you do not have to stay. It can always come back in another time point in your life where it works out a little bit better. But I think there's if I don't do this, I'm never going to get another opportunity. There will be another opportunity, and it has to fit in with your life right now. And the other thing I think is for employers, just be really mindful when you are employing young physios or physios that do want to go into that high performance space. If you give them the opportunities to go and travel and say, you can go and do this, but you have a job to come back to, they will most likely stay with you for a very long period. And, you'll reap the reward of that experience of them going and doing that and having that really good relationship. So I think it's a real two-way street that if you have such you must be here and, I won't facilitate you going to do that, you might lose really good clinicians who are taking a part-time role in an elite sports team to, try and grow their career, but then they can't also continue to do that at the same time. So the tricky thing is I do think that life is just harder 10 years down the track and things are so much more expensive and the rate of pay for the level of requirement I don't think is always following a really linear trajectory in physio. So there's a lot more to consider now.
Yeah. Look, so much gold dropped right there, Karina. I think the message that I got was, yes, there'll be many variables. Weigh them up, but don't let can I do this be one of the variables. You'll either step right in and step up, or if it doesn't quite fit, you can veer off and do something else. And I love that message for practice owners as well. I mean, it's really hard. They talk about retention, or I trained this person up and then they left. But that's a really lovely way to look at it more as a bigger picture lifetime perspective. Physios will drop into and out of your lives, and maybe they'll drop back in exactly when you need them. So to just be really open to supporting those opportunities. What a great chat. What an amazing career. You've still got so much more to do as well in your career. So thank you for breaking down some of it. I think we could have talked for 3 hours, but we really appreciate it, Karina. And maybe we'll hear about some new adventures on another episode down the track.
Thank you so much for having me, and lovely to chat, and look forward to seeing how your podcast goes. It's really exciting.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Karina. See you later.
Bye.
Gosh, she's been busy in her career, hasn't she?
Man, what a great little podcast about just having a bit of a chat with to be honest with you, such a kind person. Like I really enjoy talking to Karina because she exudes humble positivity, and it just also seems to, despite what sounded like some pretty stressful situations, just kind of pivot towards the next opportunity. And you can kind of just see it and hear it, where she's somebody that would make a lot of assets to a team just by being supportive. So awesome to have a conversation with her.
Yeah, I think it's so lovely that she feels like some of the opportunities happen to her, but she's obviously done a lot to put herself in those positions to have those opportunities come her way.
Yeah.
Now, something that we do love to do here at Off Script Physio is to do a donation on behalf of our guest so that we can appreciate our guest's time and also pay things forward. And Karina has nominated White Ribbon Australia to support the prevention of men's violence against women. You can find the link in our show notes. See you next week.